אמר 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 רבי אלעזר, אמר רבי חנינא.
Welcome to Maya Online, a podcast of Hebrew College. Learn more about Maya Online at www.hebrewcollege.edu/Maya Online. Maya is spelled M-E-A-H. Today's podcast is part of a series in which we explore the Maya Online course, Journey Through the Bible, with renowned Bible scholar, Professor Mark Brettler from Duke University. In this episode, Dr. Brettler explores ancient Israelite history.
In the previous segment, I mentioned that Israel was a latecomer into the ancient Near Eastern world. But what does that really mean? How much of a latecomer was ancient Israel? When did ancient Israelite history begin? And how should we understand the outlines of ancient Israelite history? That is what I would like to cover in this segment. You can look at the beginning of ancient Israelite history in at least two ways. You could take the biblical account seriously or literally as a historical account and use the evidence in the book of Genesis and say that biblical history begins with Abraham, who might be considered the first Jew or the first Israelite. However, from the perspective of the modern academic historian, there is no ancient Near Eastern evidence for the existence of Abraham at all, and certainly no evidence for when he might have existed. Thus, when most scholars talk about the beginning of ancient Israel, they point to a particular Egyptian stele, which is illustrated on this slide, which is called the Merneptah stele, after an Egyptian pharaoh, an Egyptian king who reigned from the years 1213 to 1203 BCE. This Egyptian king campaigned against various lands and peoples on the Eastern Mediterranean basin, and in typical ancient Egyptian royal fashion exaggerated his victory. In part of that stele, he states, "Israel is laid waste, his seed is not." There is a particular sign in the Egyptian hieroglyphics before the word Israel, which means that we're talking about a people, an ethnic group. And in terms of the geography of this particular stele, it is clear that we're talking about our Israel, the Israel of the ancient Bible, located in the east of the Mediterranean. This battle supposedly took place in the year 1207. It is likely that the battle itself did take place, for the Egyptians typically did not totally make up battles, but they often did exaggerate. Thus, this piece of evidence suggests that by the year 1207, a people called Israel existed in the place that we think of to the east of the Mediterranean. So that is the beginning of Israel, or at least that indicates that Israel had existed by then. Exactly when it began is not terribly certain. It is useful to periodize history. We do this with all types of history. In American history, we might talk about the antebellum period, for example. We can periodize history by wars. We can periodize history by centuries. There are various ways of doing it. As I like to say, we periodize history out of convenience. History does not periodize itself. What I'd like to explore with you here, and again, there are many more details concerning this in Chapter 4 of how to read the Jewish Bible. I encourage you to read this after the slides if you have not read that chapter already. But this is the typical periodization. As I go through this, please listen to me carefully. Sometimes I'm going to use the words according to the Bible. That means that there is no outside confirmation to the events that I am talking about. When those words are omitted, either I have outside confirmation or I have strong reasons to believe that the biblical account, even though it is not confirmed elsewhere, is accurate. According to the biblical account, ancient Israel established a monarchy somewhere around the year 1000 BCE. Again, according to the biblical account, that monarchy was first established by King Saul from the tribe of Benjamin, and was later followed by Kings David and Solomon from the tribe of Judah, each of whom reigned for 40 years according to the biblical account. Again, according to the biblical account, after the death of King Solomon, there was a civil war, and the kingdom split into two, with Judah, the smaller kingdom to the south. Thus, it is sometimes called the southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom, also called Israel. That's just to confuse you, because Israel can sometimes refer just to the northern kingdom and sometimes can refer to the northern kingdom plus the southern kingdom together. Thus, the northern kingdom was established in the year 922 as the larger, more powerful kingdom. That kingdom existed for 2 centuries. And here I do not need to say according to the biblical account, because this is attested in Assyrian records as well. Assyria was one of the powers in Mesopotamia. They exiled the northern kingdom in 722. Some of you may know about this in various silly stories about the 10 lost tribes and where they ended up. They ended up in Israel, in Africa, in America, wherever. Don't believe any of those stories. They ended up, by and large, in Assyria. Thus, after 722, the northern kingdom, Israel in that narrow sense, no longer existed, and Judah alone, the southern kingdom, existed. Several decades later, Assyrian power waned, and the Babylonians gained ascendancy. They were the southern power in ancient Mesopotamia. Judah rebelled against them in the year 586. The first temple, which according to the biblical account was built by King Solomon, was destroyed by the Babylonians, and many Judeans were exiled to Babylon. In the year 539, yes, I know that year is not on the slide, King Cyrus conquered Babylon, and 1 year later told the Judeans that they are free to return home. This ended the Babylonian exile, and thus begins what we call the post-exilic period. It also begins a period of domination by the Persians, which ended approximately in year 333, when Alexander the Great conquered the land of Israel as he was conquering the entire ancient world. The land of Israel thus moved from under Persian hegemony to Greek hegemony in approximately the year 333. The next 2 dates I want to talk about are post-biblical, but will be relevant for the end of Unit 7, the end of Module 7. In the year BCE, which again is later than any biblical book was written, the Romans conquered Judah, or that area, from the Greeks, and about 130 years later, in the year 70 CE, destroyed the Second Temple. Thus, we can periodize biblical history into the following periods. The pre-monarchic period, before the rise of the monarchy, perhaps around the year 1000, a period in which, and we're not really sure this happened from a historical vantage point, David and Solomon ruled over both northern and southern Israel, the period of the United Monarchy, from about 1000 to 922. Then the period of the divided monarchy, which begins in 922, with the Civil War and the North breaking away from Judean kingship, from Davidic kingship. Then that whole period until 586, when the exile more or less began, may be called the pre-exilic period. The exilic period runs from the destruction of 586 until Cyrus the Great told the Judeans they could return in 538, And finally, the post-exilic period begins in the year 538. This slide should just increase your geographical competence, giving you a sense of how the Judeans moved from Judea into the area of Babylon and the various cities to which they moved. You might be surprised that in terms of periodization, I and many other scholars put so much emphasis on the Babylonian exile. This is so for several reasons, both negative and positive. First of all, this period represents many losses. Priests who were foundational to that society could no longer function in the temple, for the temple had been destroyed. The Davidic king, who was the central leader in the earlier period, could no longer reign. As we will discuss in a later module, some people probably thought that prophecy, which was a central ancient Israelite religious institution, could no longer function in that period. And instead, certain institutions which probably did exist earlier gained tremendous importance during the Babylonian exile. Book religion became more important. Observance of the Shabbat, of the Jewish Sabbath, which did not depend on the land, became more important. And likely circumcision as a religious institution became more central in this time period. Furthermore, monotheism developed in a stronger way in this period. As you can see from this slide in Exodus chapter 15, verse 11, which I alluded to in the previous module, many biblical texts are not monotheistic. This is true even of the second text of this slide, from Exodus chapter 20, which does not say in the so-called Ten Commandments, "There are no other gods," but says, "You shall have no other gods beside me." In contrast, in later texts, for example, from the exilic text in Isaiah chapter 45, there you have a very clear statement, "I am the Lord, and there is none else. Beside me, there is no God," and so forth. There are no texts similar to this from earlier biblical periods.
That's it for today. Learn more about Maya online, including how you can help a member of the armed services take our paid online courses at www.hebrewcollege.edu/Maya online. We'd love your feedback about today's show. Email us at mayaonline@hebrewcollege.edu. If you like the show, please leave us a review in iTunes or whichever podcasting service you use to subscribe. Our music is from Gala, a 10th anniversary celebration of the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College.